Hey everyone, and welcome back to Shift Points. Today we're going to be working on this 1955 Chevrolet truck still. It's got the LS swap in it. We're going to run some more wires. We're going to find something in the headliner that we didn't expect. We're going to see if we can see what the gauges look like somewhere other than that box over there. And there might even be a rare sighting of a creature that some people didn't expect to get on camera. That's my dad. Thanks for joining. People ask a lot why projects like this take as long as they do. Sometimes even the simplest of tasks can add an extra day or two onto everything. So when we started working on this truck, in the previous video you saw we had the Heights front suspension in it, and we have the 4 9-inch with the strange axles. With those strange axles, they came with 1/2-20 thread lug studs. So the Heights system came with 7/16 lug studs. So we had to take everything apart. We had to take we had to take the rotor off the front of the truck and to change out these lug studs. So we start to looking. These are the lug studs that were in the caliper itself. So you can see the shoulder with the knurling on it and the threads, and we had to take these out to replace them with the new ones. So we reach out to start looking to try and find something in a 1/2-20 that's as close to this as we possibly can get it. So that turns into looking on the internet, calling Napa store, calling these different places, trying to find something that's similar. Finally, we found something that's is as close as that we could get it to similar, and so we reach out to the Napa store. They don't have it in stock. We can get it the next morning. So there's a lot of this. There's a lot of the next morning, next day, next couple days trying to get this stuff ordering. There's a lot of hurry up and wait sometimes, and you have to do things in between while you're working on it. So you can see here we've already went ahead and replaced this, and with this lug stud here, the threads on it, or excuse me, the knurling on it was not as long as the knurling on this. So Dad took that lug stud and it's been pressed in here. And Dad, did you turn this down any, or is that just how it ended up being?
Huh?
Did you turn this knurling down any, or is it just how it ended up?
Because of the wheel thickness, they're not going to protrude into the wheel stud diameter hole in that wheel is 5/8.
Okay.
The splines on the stud is 9/16.
Okay.
So it
would never interfere with
interference whatsoever.
Okay. So when you press these studs in here, you can see that the knurling does stick out slightly past the rotor itself, and then it starts into the thread. So what he's saying is the diameter here on this knurling is actually a smaller diameter than what's in the wheel here. So if we lift this wheel up, so you can see here, the diameter of those of the knurling here is smaller diameter than this hole here in the wheel. And since, I mean, if everyone probably knows, but on a wheel, the wheel is supported here in this center section here. So this isn't going to be the supporting of the wheel. So as long as those studs are a smaller diameter than this, there's not going to be interference. And since that knurling doesn't stick out too far, the actual acorn style lug nuts that we'll end up using on these wheels will cinch up and lock everything up how it's supposed to. So again, something that probably should have took a couple hours or something to just run up and grab turns into a 2-day thing. Tell me what you're working on.
I'm working on a pressure regulator fuel filter for the LS and the pump. And these fittings I do not like. We'll see if we can find something else.
So you can see here, so Dad put this in. This is another thing that comes along whenever something sets for 2 or 3 years, and you have to kind of relearn everything you were doing when you started working on it. So you can actually see on this fitting, let me get this to focus up here, that even when this was just put in the one time, it actually had rounded the shoulders off on this fitting. So that's why he's saying he doesn't like it, is this is made to be a replacement filter and to regulate the fuel pressure. If this gets plugged up or over time you need to change your fuel, you want to change the fuel filter, you need to make it easily, and this mounts on the inside of the frame. You can see that in the last video. That mounts on the inside of the frame, and it's pretty common on any modern car nowadays to have a filter like that, of that similar style. And so you want to be able to change it easily. So if in one time those fittings have already had the shoulders wrung off of them, it's not going to be so easy to take off the next time. So again, something that we thought was already kind of taken care of, you start looking at it and find little things like this from a couple years ago, looking at it. Yeah, we can get that to focus up a little better. So you can see just that long, or just that one time, these shoulders have been wrung off of this fitting. So now we're investigating a little better quality fitting and something that we can use, or maybe even changing the location of the filter itself to make it a little easier to change in the future. Now the reason why this came up is basically because we're going to be running this braided fuel line, and that comes from that fuel regulator. So you have two lines that come from the tank to that regulator. One's an in line, comes from the pump in the fuel tank here, comes through the pump through this line into that regulator, and then that steel line that you saw there runs down the frame rail, comes here to the back of the engine, and then gets plugged in here, and then that feeds fuel and pressurizes the fuel into the fuel injectors themselves. Sorry, they're in here. So into these fuel injectors. So we needed to cut this fuel line to length, and we had it ran and routed the direction that we believed it should go, and then realized that we need to start looking at this pressure regulator, because if we cut this, and we already have this here, and this stuff is not cheap by any means, especially the stainless, if we go ahead and cut this, and then we end up having to change the location of that pressure regulator and filter, then we're going to have to go buy another chunk of this stainless wire. So you can see under here that that bracket is where that regulator mounts, and right there there's, you know, a brake line fitting. There's some other mounts also there. Looks like the shock mounts is right there in front of it too. So it's kind of a tight place, but when you get back here, you're kind of limited on space in general. So this is how this came up. Like with this already being mounted, we thought was already taken care of, but you know, that's just how this goes sometimes. All right, so Dad got to looking at it. We actually bought these fittings a few months ago, I guess, probably 6 months ago or more. He found some that actually are way better and what we really need to use with this fuel filter.
This is just a quick connect that attaches directly to the line without all this plastic nylon rigmarole threaded that had got kind of messed up. I think the sizes are a little off, for probably imported fittings, but we can replace this mess with this quick connect. So underneath the truck, you can just take it loose, replace the filter, and this is what we're looking for. So get a couple of them, I think we'll be in business.
Yeah. So again, when you let something set for a long time, the industry changes a lot. We forget a lot. So when we put those Summit fittings on there, there's a pretty good chance that that was what we should have used at the time. Because like I said, that has been on there for a while. But now these are Red Horse fittings. We got these, and they work really great. We've seen really good stuff with these so far. And so we can use that, and that's going to make everything way easier and fixes our whole problem. So you saw last time we were getting everything wrapped up on the wiring for it, for this truck. Something that we've started using in the past couple wiring jobs that we've done is this, it's like a braided, it's not really a split loom, like the old plastic loom that you see that's always so ugly. It's kind of almost a fabric material, and it splits it open, allows you to run your wires down through it. It's nice in a couple ways. It's not as ugly as the plastic split loom and all of that. It's a lot more flexible, so you can route it a lot easier. It comes in a bunch of different sizes. This is some of the smaller stuff. Goes all the way up to 3/4 and more. So all the wires that are coming out of the firewall and going forward to the headlights and things like that with horn and the headlights and the fan power and all of that, it's a big loom of wires that's going that direction. So that's using the 3/4, and then you can route all the way down the frame and use that stuff for the rear tail lights and stuff like that too. So we really like using this stuff. Makes things a lot easier. I'm gonna try and use it and go ahead and get everything wrapped up under the dash here. So you can see now everything has been loomed up. Everything will have to be tied up, of course, and kind of cleaned up a little bit more at this point. But you can see what a neat job all this loom does as far as just keeping everything protected. Adds one extra layer of protection to all of this, so nothing is going to rub or short or do anything like that behind the dash. And then I think the next thing we'll be ready to do is go ahead and this plug will be right here for the speedometer and tachometer, and this plug here is for the other tack, so excuse me, the other gauges. So I think the next thing we'll do is get this kind of tidied up a little bit better and get the gauges mounted. So after we got back to working on this thing, I got to looking at it while I've been inside so much and realized this headliner, it's kind of the old cardboardy style headliner, and you can see it's already sagging down here, super moldy. So one thing that I'm going to do, for two reasons. First off, to get this out so we can decide what we're going to do as far as if we're going to replace it, or if the roof looks good, we might just leave the headliner out of it. And the other reason is there's a wire that goes from the headlight switch over there that runs up the A-pillar and then over here to this dome light. Truck doesn't have any sort of door switches, so the light won't come on whenever you open the doors, but it will come on if you pull out that headlight, or if you turn the headlight switch knob. So just like on your own car, you can turn your gauge lights higher, lower, dim them, and then if you'll feel that headlight switch click into one last notch and your dome light will come on. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull this out and pull that old wire that is very, very stiff. It's been here for a very long time. We're going to pull that out and run a new fresh wire over here, decide on what we're going to do with the headliner, because that's also going to figure out, it's going to change with the direction of the routing of that wire. So figure all that out. So I'm going to pull that out next. Well, as you guys saw, it was not exactly what we were expecting to be in there. There was a giant rat house right there. Yeah, it was pretty terrible. And the roof looks pretty awful too, honestly. This, you can tell it's got this old, just grossness. And this used to be, it's actually part of that cardboard layer, or it's actually like a foam insulator is what used to be in there. So we're really hoping that this roof was just going to be kind of smooth and nice, but it's really rough, pitted, and like I said, that rat house was not what we expected to be there, but it explains why that headliner was so sagged right there and had like the mold on it. So, but if you look over here, you follow that down, there's the wire that runs down here to the headlight switch that controls our dome light. So yesterday you guys saw us pull the headliner out and go ahead and get this dome light pulled out and pull that wire. So I got that wire that was run down here to where the headlight switch was. It ran up here to the dome light. I got it pulled out, and to quickly show you kind of why it needed to be removed, this wire itself, you can see it's actually like formed. It's so stiff from being up in there for what, more than 60 years now. almost 70 years. It's been in there, formed to the cab, so it was time to put a new wire in there. So on top of that, we were going to look into possibly a new dome light, but the one that came out looked really nice, and so Dad's over here testing it to see
Works fine.
if the switch. So it actually has a switch built into the dome light itself. So I showed you yesterday that it doesn't have any door switches, so the lights don't come on when you open the doors. So this truck actually had a 12 volt, a constant 12 volt source to it that just ran into this switch. So we're gonna leave the switch because it's kind of neat. It has the old fabric coated wires here. But all that looks really good, so I don't really want to mess with it, because I mean, you could, if something went wrong with it, you can easily pull that dome light out and change this. But because the new wire is going to be run from there at the headlight switch, so what you can do, you can just leave this switch on all the time and then control it with the headlight switch itself. So every time you notch it over, you can notch the headlight switch on, and the dome light will turn on. So pretty neat. Pretty neat to see this old stuff like this and how they used to do it, and still super functioning. Like I said, almost.
We don't have door switches, so we need to keep that switch, I guess. Just run it through this switch, because we don't have door switches.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can just leave that switch on, and then if you got in the truck and you wanted to, you could just flip the headlight switch on and the dome will turn on.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So perfect. See, every job's pretty easy as long as you got time lapse on your camera. So, I got the wire ran up here to the dome light. It's in the two clips here. It's run down across the door frame here, and then down the A-pillar. This is the end of it right here. So this will get connected up into this connection right here for the headlight switch, and that's just one more wire already done. So next thing we'll do is probably get the dome light itself reinstalled, get a fitting on that, or get a connector on that, get the dome light reinstalled, and then all the wiring in the cab should be wrapped up at this point, really. I think I'm going to just reroute some of this loom a little bit under the dash. I have to run 2 wires in here to connect, or 3 wires in here to connect from the high beam switch for the high beam indicator on the gauge, and the left and right turn signal on the gauge also. So have those 3 connections, then I'm going to get the gauges installed. Good morning. It is a rainy Sunday morning here in Marshall, North Carolina, but I'm about to go out of town for like 4 days. So I came in this morning to try and get a couple things knocked out, specifically for this video, because I really want you guys to see what these gauges are going to look like once they're installed in the truck. So this morning I've got about 4 more wires I need to connect. I need to connect the high beam indicator, run a wire down to the dimmer switch, connect T into that dimmer switch, so that we've got a high beam indicator, and then go down to the column and get the left and right turn signal, tap into those wires on the column itself, and then run a ground for all 4 of those wires. So that should be pretty straightforward. Then we're going to install the gauges in there, get them bolted in place, see how they look, because all I've seen them is just holding them in like I showed you in the first video, and just seeing them right here in this box. So I think it is time to get those installed. Now, the other thing that I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on before I left was we were talking about the fuel filter and fuel pressure regulator. So that turned into another fiasco, a lot like the lug studs. We got the Red Horse fittings. We got those ordered. They came the next day. We got them snapped, and we started doing we snapped some of them onto the fuel pressure regulator here. So you can see here how these snap in place. And now you can see that they lock in place very nicely. When we first got them though, the plastic disconnects in them, I don't know I'll try to make sure I can find you one that looks bad. So if you look closely at this, see if we can hold it down here on the table, get a little bit of a background here. So if you see this, you see how that finger on that connect is actually sprung open a little bit. So what would happen was when you would snap this connection onto here, this fitting would just pull off. So these are brand new fittings and they don't work. So what we ended up having to do was, after we took the fitting out and we saw that this was sprung open, and that was actually what was causing that, this needed to be closed more so that it would snap and hold. We called up O'Reilly's up the road in Mars Hill, and they had a pack of these from Dorman, and these are really nice. And they have, you can see, I don't know if you can see in that fitting right there, how much more closed these are than the one that came in the fitting itself. So we put a couple of the Dorman ones on those fittings, and everything snaps in, everything's really nice and solid. So that is great. So now those fittings are done. This assembly is basically ready to go back in, and then we can shorten up the fuel line. Again, much like the lug studs, this is a 5-minute task that ended up taking 2 days, and I added on to it because we had to order fittings and wait for them to get here. And then when those didn't work, then we had to go to the store and find a way to make them work. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. Then I'm going to jump in here, get these wires run, get the gauges installed today. So when I was trying to prep and get ready for this a few days ago, I went ahead and connected this wire, which is the Ron Francis supplied wire, onto the positive side of the lights. But what I didn't do was I didn't connect that light into that hole on the bezel before I made that connection. So you saw this heat shrunk fitting is bigger than that hole. So we're off to a good start. I already had to snip these off. I'm gonna have to cut these fittings off, reconnect them, and then we can start doing this. So I told you guys that I was going to run the wires to get power to the left and right turn signals in the gauges and the high beam indicator from the foot dimmer switch in the floor. So let me explain to you a little bit more why I'm doing that. So where I'm going to have to tee off, if you look right here, you can see this side. This is the male side of the column harness. So inside of this column harness, you have left, right, rear and front turn signal power, you have the horn power, you have the four-way power, you have the horn ground, you have four-way power. And so in this column, this is what plugs into this female side of the Ron Francis harness. That harness runs over here into the fuse box, which then supplies power to all of this column and everything. Makes for a really nice install, but you do have to tee into these wires on this so that you can supply power to the indicators on the dash light itself. So I'm actually going to come back here just a little ways on the wire and tee into that and run power up to those wires, and then run one ground for all three of the grounds for the high beam indicator and the left and right turn signals. So it'll be one ground that runs down over here to the ground block over here on the on the kick panel, and then we'll have the 3 power wires coming off of that, or 2 wires off of that harness, and then 1 off that foot dimmer switch right down here. So let's try and get that done, and if we get those done, then we can get the gauges installed, which is only 6 nuts. So let's see if that's actually as easy as it sounds. So I'm sure everyone here has heard of Murphy's Law. That basically means that that's a law that says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Well, there's an addendum to that. I call it Jake's Law. And it's if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And if it does go wrong, it's going to go wrong in the least convenient location, hardest to reach. So, I had to wrestle it, had to fight it. Pretty sure those gauges tried to bite me at one point actually, but they're in. And luckily they're in and they look really good. So, if we look at them right here, see if we can get back here, get this light turned out of the way so we can see them, not be blinded. They turned out really good. So they look like they really just belong here. You got the speedometer, tachometer here. You got our oil pressure, gasoline, sending unit, temperature, and battery for this one. They look really good. I'm not a huge fan of how they mounted, but in general, they are pretty sturdy. We might have to pull this one back out and just make sure it doesn't try and slide around and move around. Dad, you want to come see them?
What?
Do you want to come see the gauges?
Sure.
This will be the first time he has seen them in place too. What do you think?
Did they tighten up?
They did tighten up pretty good. This one is, since that one finger is just like kind of, it's not like the full width of the finger, it's just kind of on the tip. It tries to move a little, but in general, it's pretty good.
Okay.
So, what do you think? Look good?
Looks good, yeah.
I think they look really nice. I need polished a little bit, but cleaned up. But I think they'll do what they're supposed to do. So I think that's gonna do it for this episode. We got a few things done, wrapped up on the truck. It's amazing how these little things really just add up. You know, I went through and I've built a list on kind of what all we need to do to get the truck fired up, and it really seems like so little, but there's so many things that are that just really add up and take a lot of time. So getting those gauges in, I think that's really important. I think that looks really good. That gets us really close to, at least since all the connections are made, we'll be able to fire this engine. We'll be able to monitor it, make sure everything's good, make sure that my wiring is actually how it's supposed to be. So I think that's going to be really good. Like I told you guys earlier, I'm going to be out of town next week, but Mom and Dad are going to take over some camera work. I think it's his plan to talk about front end alignment. So when we put these front end, we pulled the straight axle that was under this thing out and put in this Heights Independent. He wants to talk about kind of what he did to make sure that the front end and the rear end were all aligned. This is a new rear end also. Kind of the work that he did to make sure that all that stuff's square, make sure that this truck's gonna track square down the road. It's one of the worst things whenever you see, especially these old cars that have been restored and they're tracking down the road and the back's setting one way or the other because the rear end's crooked in the truck or car or whatever. So he wants to talk to you guys about that a little. So I'm gonna leave it with him. So you're gonna see a lot less of me in the next video probably. So you'll probably be happy about that. But if you don't mind, make sure that you like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I'm trying to put up posts every once in a while to kind of see these intermediate steps between the videos. And then also, as you watch this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and to leave us some comments. So I'm trying to keep these video links in that 15 to 30 minute area. Tell me if that's a good length. If you'd rather it be a little shorter, if you'd like to see little snippets a little faster, let's do that. You know, just put the comments down there. Comment on anything that you liked about this video. Tell us if you like those classic instruments gauges. I think they look awesome. I think they look a lot like the old gauges, and I think they're going to be super functional. But tell us if that's what you'd have done. If you'd have done something different, or if you'd have sent those old gauges out to get them fixed and run them with a modern engine, that was a possibility. But we decided that this is the way that we were going to go. So leave us some comments. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. I'm happy to respond. I'm the guy that's sitting there behind the computer that's responding to all this stuff. So make sure you like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Thanks for joining Shift Points.